continue. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Good morning, if there's a little delay. Good morning, Mom. Sunny and bright and Granby. Hey, Mom. Good morning, Cindy, Penny, Kirsten, Suze, April, Catherine, Martha, Beverly. Everybody's here. Looks like we're getting some pretty good weather reviews right across the map. Great. And Catherine, Martha, Beverly. Let me see. I'm doing my scrolling thing. We'll see what happens. You know, I didn't realize yesterday while I was running the show, the format's changed in this program, and it's still a great program, but I didn't realize people were commenting. And somebody asked toward the end of the show yesterday, the book that we're going to be looking at again, the Mildred Cole Peladeau book on rug hooking in Maine, 19th century into 1940. And the question was, are there lots of pictures? Is it profusely illustrated? And it is hugely illustrated. It is the best illustrated book I can think of. Like all Schiffer books, I mean, they're just the best. To me, they're the best. Sorry, everybody else. Rug hooking. These are just the best books. They're super heavyweight, beautiful books. They always have like the printed cover under the dust jacket. Just high quality books, And for people like us, for PLU, who love rug hooking, a lot of you I know also love antiques, and they do a huge amount of books on antiques. So worth looking at their website anytime. Good morning, Jill. Good to see you. Good to see you. Maybe the busyness is subsiding now a little bit. Yesterday after I ran the show on looking at this book, Early Rug Hooking in Maine, we were talking about documenting, and I was sort of reiterating what Mildred says in the book, that there is a huge gap in knowledge and sort of momentum with recording rug hooking history in the late 19th, early 20th century. And right after I finished the show, Amber wrote, and she sent a nice message from Canada saying that, hey, Becky, glad you made it, saying she was making a great point that I had forgotten, that's worth saying. When we talk about this hole in rug hooking history, she made the point that there was a time in the early 20th century and the time when the popularity of the craft really waned. And part of the reason it did was because of the American Industrial Revolution and people buying stuff instead of making stuff. And she brought up the point about poverty, right? And I remember this too. Hey, Sheila. I remember this too from my grandmother's house. There were like some doors that she kept shut and stuff, and I know she was a bit fussy about what she had showing and not. I remember there was a thing about the mentality of like feeling like you didn't have nice enough things and being a bit ashamed. And I think that was very pronounced in some houses in the early 20th century. Amber was making the point, that so many women, and again, she was writing from Canada, that so many housewives were in a situation where it was like sort of shameful. It was a bit of a stigma to have things around you that you had made because they weren't store-bought, they weren't fancy, they were things you did for free, and they were not at that point, because of the wane in popularity, being esteemed as folk art yet. They were just stuff that you made because you didn't have the money to buy it. And again, stigma. And I think that was a really solid point. That is probably the biggest reason, or the biggest sort of influence in having lost that history and lost a lot of rugs over those years, because nobody wanted to see them and nobody wanted to be reminded of poverty. So that was a great point. Amber, thank you so much for getting in touch. It really got me thinking again. Hi, Relda. It really got me thinking again about that whole aspect of things. And it brought me back into this book, which is just my favorite. If you haven't gotten it yet, the link is on this video. I'm pretty sure. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure. Rug Hooking in Maine. This is just, this really is my favorite book. I know I say that every time we look at a new book. It's such a good book. It's phenomenal. Now, we left off yesterday talking a little bit about, and by the way, the first Magdalena class tonight, it's a design class. We have quite a few people on for tonight's class and again for our Sunday's class. I am super excited. I'm getting everything all set. I'm surrounded by Magdalena stuff and lollipop trees. I posted that great Burl Ives song on the Facebook group Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club yesterday. It's called The Lollipop Tree. It's not about Magdalena, but it's a lollipop tree, and I thought it might get you in the mood. But I'm super excited for tonight. I've been getting all my stuff ready. I got I got all the Canada dye class, Mother's Day dye, American Mother's Day dye class kits to Canada this morning. I was waiting on all that wool, and a huge shout out to Naomi. Remember, I went to go see her at a coffee time at Ravensgate Primitives. She lives one town over, and she really, really saved my bacon by, she had lots of white wool, and I needed some monk's cloth because my stuff was so, 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 so late. She really saved me, and I was able to get all those orders out. So thank you so much. Tara, good morning. We left off yesterday talking about the different categories of rug. And if you were to find yourself in an antique store looking at a rug that you believed to be a hooked rug, there could be some question as to whether it actually was. Now, does it matter if you love it and you think it's beautiful? Of course it doesn't matter. But it is a curious thing to be able to identify a style of rug, right? Just like I have this ongoing wish of, I'm not such a quilter anymore. I'm not much of a quilter at all anymore. But I always wanted to learn what every block was, like a second language, like the Rosetta Stone, to be able to look at something and just in an instant go, oh, that's New York something, or Drunkards whatever, or just really rare ones, not the Drunkards one, but the really rare ones, and have that sort of inventory in my head. Well, I feel like that about rugs too. I'm really trying to train myself to anticipate the look of something that I haven't seen yet. So when we're looking at different categories of rugs, you probably know what a hooked rug looks like close up because maybe you hook or punch, and it's going to look like that. Now, we get into some trouble when we look at the other early categories of rugs. Hey, Anne. And those categories are, well, there are three basic types of shared rugs, and we talk about these a lot, but that they are bias, caterpillar, and penny, sometimes called button, right? That's like a Canada, US thing, penny or button rug. Now, the bias shared rugs, I'm looking at this book now because she's going to show you the best examples of these three things that I've ever seen. The bias shared rugs are made by, and I'm going to give you a visual here, cutting on the bias, so diagonal strips, folding them in half lengthwise, so the long way, and literally sewing the folded edge to the backing fabric. So this is a yarn sewn rug. This is not a hooked rug. The process is repeated, sewing the second strip so close to the first that it forces the first strip to stand up. So what you're doing is folding strips, sewing them on, and then sewing others so close to them that it has a pile, right? They're supporting each other on the sides. Now that is the first kind of shared rug. The second kind, and I'm going to show you examples of these, is a caterpillar rug. And this is basically the same thing, only that the strips are sewn down the middle, so like a running stitch up the middle of a strip. When you reach the end, you pull it, or pucker it, or gather it, and then you sew that down to the backing. Caterpillar rugs are sometimes called chenille rugs because of the way they look, that wavy, fuzzy line. You're sewing another sewn rug. These are all sewn rugs, the shared rugs, right onto the backing, same thing. And then the third category is the penny rug or the button rug, and that's done by cutting the fabric, which is like wool or felted wool or any kind of felt, into circles, folding the circles into quarters. Now remember, we saw this in one of the British rag rug books. Taking your circle, folding it into quarters, right? Almost like you're going to make a flower, like a three-dimensional flower, and then sewing that to your backing. And when you put a whole bunch of those together, just like the other shared rugs, it stands up because of all the pressure and support around it. So let's look at those categories, and then I'm going to move on. I just think it's so interesting. The thing with the shared rug, it sometimes looks like a rug that has a cut pile. It can look like a hooked rug with a cut pile, and I'm going to show you how this is confusing. So let me get the glare out. If you look at this rug here, you see all that wavy business, right, in the corners. The reason that's wavy is because that is the edge of the wool. None of this is looped. That is all the edge, and it's all standing up. Hey, Linda! It's all standing up, right? So as a result, you get this ruffly sort of ocean waves look. Now you can see, let me see if I can come in even closer. can you see how looking at that, you go, okay, I'm seeing some very, very fine lines. These are definitely not loops. But couldn't this be a clipped hooked rug? Yeah, it could. It could be a clipped hooked rug. That's when you've got to look at the back and see if you can get any clues as to whether it looks like it's been sewn or hooked. It's going to be hard with these rugs that have this huge crossover in the way that they look. There's a huge crossover. So a shared rug is going to look like that. You're going to see a lot of fine lines, and you're going to see a lot of motion because you're looking at the edge of the wool. You're not looking at loops. Now, this is an example of a caterpillar rug. This is the one where you do the running stitch and then you gather it and then you sew that on. So if you picture a chenille bedspread, right, like beautiful old-time bedspreads, they have the fuzzy sort of caterpillar look to them. The pattern running through it has the same look. This, I think, is going to look a lot different than a traditional hooked rug. So this isn't going to give you as much trouble in identifying. I can't say that I've seen many caterpillar rugs. I know I've seen some, but I can't say I see them often. Isn't that a nice thing, though? You see, it has that chenille look. It has that very fuzzy, furry look, very three-dimensional look, and I wanted to show you. I don't think that she put. Okay, this is a penny rug. This is going to be a tough one to see because it's so old. This one here is a penny rug. So this is the one where they cut circles and folded them into quarters and then just sewed the tippity tip of it and let the thing fan out. And then you would be sewing lots more right around there and they'd be all standing up because they're so close to each other. Now that's a penny rug. The last one I wanted to show you just to sort of complete this category of rug conversation. To remember yesterday I was talking about the reed rug where you would be sewing and very hard to differentiate between a reed yarn sewed rug or a hooked rug because the person would be putting a reed, like a straw, or a knitting needle and sewing loops around it, then pulling it out. And you're ending up with these beautiful uniform loops, which look like they're hooked. This is a reed rug. And she's showing, I mean, this whole book is examples, right? So to say there's a lot of pictures in this book is such an understatement. This is very, very, hey, Joy, I'm looking forward to it too. This is a very old rug. I'll tell you the details of this rug in a second, but it's not in great shape, but it's important historically. This is what the back looks like. So you see, I mean, that looks much more like stitching than it does hooking, right? I mean, it looks a little bit like punching, but this looks like a needlework, the back of a needlework. This is in such shape because a totally unidentified rug. It was found in a trunk that was purchased at an auction in Maine many, many years ago, and they believe it to be circa 1850. So it's quite old. So just to conclude that conversation on the different styles of rugs that can kind of masquerade as a hooked rug or a punched piece, probably will always continue to be confusing. Now, she also enters upon, at the beginning of this book, a really interesting conversation. There's a few things that she says in this book that are so original and interesting. Hey, Amber. I was just saying, Amber, you sent me that great message yesterday about people in the early 20th century and up sort of hiding their stuff with stigmas associated with homemade craft stuff rather than store-bought stuff or catalog stuff. And I really appreciated that because it was such a good insight. She gets into this conversation about the hearth rug versus the scatter rug. Now, I want to show you, where was it? I wanted to show you this rug here because we keep using the term hearth rug, and I know I did a whole coffee time, there we go, about hearth rugs. And we had a good conversation about what a hearth rug is and what it was for, because obviously hearth rugs are going to be one of the main category of early rug. So putting a rug in front of the hearth is one of the main reasons you would want to hook a rug, right? It would be right out there in the front room. Now, when you see a rug that has these dimensions, that's not very big top to bottom, but quite wide, that's going to be a hearth rug. Because again, as I said yesterday, it will have been made for to fit the very wide cooking hearth, right? The heating and cooking hearth. So very utilitarian hearth at this point, not just a fireplace. This is a long thing. When you're seeing a rug with those dimensions, you are certainly looking at a hearth rug. So you could be looking at a quite early rug. Now this is another really nice design of a hearth rug. I'm going to show you this before I go on to the point. Still early. I love this rug. And before I show it to you, I just want to say, I'm going to move this a hair because my book is not making the jump. I just want to say, they say, she says in this book, Mildred, that this particular design and variations of this design are very, very, very common. These early designs, people are copying each other, of course, and there's bound to be a lot of friendly competition from household to household, neighbor to neighbor. So she's saying this design, it's in the urn or spray of flowers is the most popular design for early hearth rugs. You see it as yarn rugs, you see it as hooked rugs, you see it in all kinds of, you see it as Waldoboro rugs, you see it in all kinds of forms, but it's basically a very ornate variation on a scroll with huge emphasis on the center motif, which in this case is flowers and sprays, right? So no basket, no tipped basket, none of those other sort of old motifs. This is a nice one because it has a nice light ground. So this one is a bit different and unusual. Now I have to say, this is an antique rug, so there's not a copyright issue with something this age. The photo is copyrighted to whoever took it, but the image is not. You can hook a rug that looks just like this. But when I looked at this rug, I thought, is it me or are there shrimp in this rug? I mean, am I hungry or are there shrimp in this rug? Do you see what I mean? Like, does that not look like a cocktail, like a shrimp cocktail, just waiting to be dipped in cocktail sauce with a little martini on the side, Mom? Right? Um, so I loved the design, and I ended up blowing it up like this. This is the way that I work, an insight into sloppy working. I ended up blowing it up to examine the shrimp cocktail, and I ended up drawing, reconfiguring the whole inside of it to make this composition, which I put up on Ribbon Candy Hooking. Feel free to go shopping. I put it up there, and I'm hooking this too because I absolutely love this. So this is a variation on a hearth rug, right? Because it has the dimensions of a hearth rug. And I put in some very pronounced shrimp cocktails with a giant lobster in the center. And I'm very happy with that. Hey, Dave! But I thought that was really funny. Just, just a variation. I must have been starving, and I am again, to be seeing seafood whenever I open a book. But I did. And so that's up there. I forget what it's called, Marine Banquet or something like that. I'll put a link in here if it's not there already. Dave, you changed you're not Slapper anymore. You changed. You changed. So I thought that was really funny. So she has a good conversation about hearth rugs and versus scatter rugs, right? Because some rugs are meant to be put, I'm talking about early rugs. I'm talking about 19th century rugs. Some rugs are meant to be put in front of the hearth, but then there are rugs that will be scattered um, all over the place. Of course, the more you make, the more time you have to make them, the more rugs you end up with, and you're not going to put them on the walls at this point, so you're going to scatter them, and then we end up with this idea of scatter rug, which is pretty new at this point. Now, she talks about the hearth rug in great detail, and do you remember from our episode on the hearth rug, I was working from some old magazine like a Country Life. I do too, Martha. I'm so hungry now. Like a Country Life type of a magazine, and it had a whole article on the hearth rug. And we were brainstorming and spitballing together on the thread. And I didn't know that it would be better to put, for example, a rug in front of the fire because wool is less sort of flammable than the wooden floor would have been. But she really blows this theory out of the water. Mildred does in this book. She says written reports indicate these rugs were used to absorb sparks that might otherwise damage an expensive oriental carpet, if there was something underneath it, in other words. Obviously, any person using these rugs to catch sparks never spent long winter nights hooking or sharing a rug. To believe that rug hookers would spend the necessary hours designing and creating a very special rug simply to catch sparks is surely a fallacy. That would have been like creating a delicate embroidery on fine linen and then employing it as a dust cloth. It is known that rugs were used as table covers, again as a source for displaying a treasured object. And she says early paintings show hearth rugs as an enhancement to other ornamentation within the well of the fireplace, but without the fire. So no fire going when the rug is in place. A study by the author of many, so she's referring to herself, many, many, many rugs over the years has yielded only one example of a rug that showed any signs of being charred from flying sparks. And she said, and that could have even been accidental. While there may have been such things as fire rugs, it is doubtful that the more desirable hearth rugs into which so much effort had been expended would have been specifically made for that purpose. So this was so interesting for me because we talked about this on Coffee Time. It does seem so illogical, anti-logical, to spend so much time on something for the purpose of it taking damage. But she's saying, having surveyed so many rugs over the years, that she's only ever once seen signs of it having sparks having hit in it. So she really doesn't buy into the theory that a hearth rug was used in front of in front of a fireplace, an open hearth, but not the fire blazing. And she goes on to say most farm wives had access to burlap bags, the open weave ideal for the hooking process. Dyes could be easily obtained, readily available. Natural dyes, barks, berries, vegetables, and inline dyes would soon appear on the market too. Hooking had become a craft open to everyone, regardless of your financial considerations. I love that part. This is the way it should be. This is the way it should have stayed. I'm also buying wool for $30-something a yard in monk's cloth and linen. It's crazy numbers, but I love it when there are references to enjoying the hobby. Coming from the heart, finding something with a loose weave or making something that you can hook into, and using scraps that you've got and having it being accessible to everyone. I love that conversation. So, she brings up something else in this book. I'm forwarding through the Waldoboro chapter because it's glorious. And there's a lot of pictures I want you to see. We've done a few episodes on Waldoboro rug. So I'm gonna skip over that for right now. And for those of you that are new watching, I will just remind you that the Waldoboro rug comes from the part of Maine that's called Waldoboro. It's a location name. Very, very high pile and cut and sculpted. Not just sheared, not just flat and even, but sculpted, right? Really, really take almost like pom-pom surface, really picking out leaves and berries and shapes and forms. Super desirable. It was an offshoot of hooking. And those rugs are rugs that we now call Waldoboro rugs. Now, have you heard the expression, the Acadian rug? This is super confusing. And I have, because I do read these old books from the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and Acadian rug does come up. Now, our friend William Winthrop Kent also brings up the Acadian rug often. Now, this is so interesting. I'm going to get through this even if I run over. This author, Mildred Cole Peladeau, she's done so much academic work and research on this book. She has solved a mystery that has been confusing for years for people who read these early books on rug hooking. References to the Acadian rug. It is super confusing. So, and you know what else is confusing? Just as a side note, if you get this book and you read it, there is a reoccurring typo in this chapter where she keeps talking about Evelyn Waugh and Edith Foley writing a book together, and I thought, Evelyn Waugh? Wow, I didn't know. He's the author of Brideshead Revisited and Handful of Dust and all of these like beautiful, big, epic, British, depressing, heavy, but beautifully written novels. And I thought, how does he have a rug hooking book out that I don't know about? It's a typo. It's Elizabeth Waugh and Edith Foley, and I do have that book, and it's a great book, and I think we've even looked at it together. But it does say Evelyn Waugh multiple times in this chapter, and I kept getting confused every time. But that aside, I circled it so that I would stop being detoured by it. In this book that Elizabeth Waugh and Edith Foley wrote in 1927, they describe an Acadian rug, right, using the term Acadian rug as they used hand-spun woolen materials exclusively and clipped the loops of their rugs, giving the surface a peculiar velvet-like quality. Extremely ornate floral wreaths formed their favorite designs, and they originated the idea, later copied by other makers of hooked rugs, of raising the design against the background so that it stood out in low relief. Right? That's a quote from that book. Just 2 years later, in the magazine called The Antiquarian, the Waldoboro rug is described, and it's described in a very similar way with velvety softness and pile. Now, Elizabeth Waugh and Edith Foley address the Acadian rug by saying a single pansy measuring 1.5 inches in diameter shows 17 different colors. no painter of flowers could have achieved finer nuances. So we're going back and forth within just a couple of years between the Waldoboro rug and the Acadian rug. Um, and she writes, I'm reading this here, she writes, Mildred, it is interesting to note that there are seemingly two nearly identical styles of rug, each defined by different points of origin, yet prior to 1929, no mention can at all be found of the Waldoboro rug. So the expression Waldoboro rug does not appear until 1929. Only Acadian rugs. So here we go. Here is the thrust of it. Here is the mystery of it. She's going to drive the point home now. To me, this is like the Da Vinci Code. Like this is like a massive cliffhanger coming together. I had like tears in my eyes while I was reading this. No one has ever been able to locate an Acadian rug, right? Just references to them. Nobody has been able to say at any point that this is an Acadian rug. I'm holding one in my hand. They are not seen in museums. They do not appear in auction catalogs, at antiques markets and exhibitions and advertisements. They have simply disappeared, or maybe they have never existed. Now, boom, boom, boom. When she's showing an illustration of the Wa Foley book from 1929, she shows a rug that is called Landscape Rugs. It's in the part of the book called Landscape Rugs of the Early American Home. She shows one rug that appeared in the home of Frederick Waugh of Kent, Connecticut. Now, this is her father-in-law. So Frederick Waugh happens to be a quite well-known maritime painter in his day who often took trips to Acadia and was painting, right? So it is entirely likely, Mildred puts this whole thing together, and I think it is ironclad. She says it is very likely that as the daughter-in-law, that Elizabeth Waugh, I almost said Evelyn, would have traveled with the family to Acadia, which is very close to Waldoboro, that whole area, right, where the Waldoboro rugs were being made, on numerous painting forays while he was working. And she would have seen Waldoboro rugs, and she would have brought Waldoboro rugs home. And because nobody yet had used the expression Waldoboro rug or Acadian rug, when she sits down to write the book, she uses the expression Acadian rug. And later, other people will start using the expression Waldoboro rug. And Mildred is making the point that she believes that they are one and the same thing. They are described identically. When you look at them pattern-wise, they look absolutely identical. I think this is so interesting. There are mysteries in the world. There are still mysteries. Everywhere you look, in every corner of every room, this is a weird one. She kept seeing references to Acadian rug. I don't know how many times I Googled Acadian rug, and what I found was an Acadian rug hooking frame. It was called the Acadian rug hooking frame. I couldn't find any rugs either. They're just not there. She's showing some pictures from two rugs in the Acadian manner. So this picture is coming from the book, the Waugh Foley book. Let's see if that's in focus. Right there, these are black and white pictures from a 1929 book. Now, yeah, I'm not going to say a bad word, but I'm darned if these are not Waldoboro rugs. You can see just in these like low quality pictures that they have a very high pile, and that they're glowing in the way Waldoboros do because they're so highly sculptured, like little pom-poms all over the place. And then she's showing you illustrations from the William Winthrop Kent books. Now, you know what I think we'll do on Friday, because tomorrow is our Zoom call, and I already put the Zoom information for our call if you want to log on at noon in the description of this video. But I think on Friday, I think I'm going to bust out all three of the William Winthrop Kent books that are considered the earliest. And we know they're not the earliest because we have looked at earlier rug hooking books. But let's look at those because, you know, just like Pro McGowan, just like so many people, you cannot underestimate or dismiss the amount of work that he did in rug hooking, the amount of information that he gathered and assimilated and published is hugely, insanely important. But there are some known errors as time goes on. Now, Mildred is saying in this book, Kent obviously compounded the era of misnaming the Waldoboro rugs as being Acadia rugs in his first book, The Hooked Rug, which was published just 3 years after the Waugh book in 1929. Published just 3 years after, yeah. And so already we're talking about the very same rugs, and they're being called two different things in two different books because there's almost an overlap at how close they are. So it's nobody's fault that he was calling them one thing and someone else was calling them another thing. But it did create confusion of language for many, many years. I think that this solution that she's come up with, that there is no such thing as an Acadian rug. Acadian rugs are Waldoboro rugs. It's just different people writing books around the same time without the internet and benefit of being able to cross-check other people. You know, again, Rosetta Stone, right? It's the problem of the Rosetta Stone. We don't have a common language for everything. Nobody said anything about a raised work rug until 1929 anyway. So one person says Acadia, one person says Waldoboro. For the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years, there's confusion over this subject. I think she has neatly and nicely tied it up and put it to rest. But that was just one example that she takes from the William Winthrop Kent book, because she's gone through all three. You know, she makes mention where information has changed over the years. It wasn't like he was wrong or sloppy. Information changed over the years, and you find out more things, and you put things together like a master detective, like Mildred is in this book. And she puts it together for you and says, does this make sense? Because nothing else makes sense. Either all of the rugs dematerialized, disappeared, were hijacked by aliens, you know, dropped into the sea, or they didn't exist and we've been calling them by the wrong name for a long time. They're all Waldoboros. That makes way more sense, doesn't it? It's like Tetris, everything falling in and locking into place all of a sudden. Great moment of that book. This book has so many great moments. On Friday, I think I'm going to combine some of the information on this book because she's got a lot on early rug hooking history. And I'm going to be looking at the three Kent books. And I think that will be our subject. It might sound very dry for those of you that love the bingo and our lively nights, but I think it will be lively. I think it will be interesting to talk about old rugs in one of our more cozy cocktail nights on Friday night. So I will be looking forward to that. No coffee time tomorrow. We're Zooming at noon. The information is in the description of this video. Please like, comment, subscribe, anything you can do to help me out with these videos. I spend a lot of time on them and I love being here with you. I will see you either tomorrow for Zoom or I will see you on Friday night for cocktail time at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same place, Ribbon Candy Hooking Channel. Have a great afternoon. I will see you soon, either way.